What's up YouTube, Dale here from Zephyr Wargames, and today I am bringing you a very spiced up version of Traptrix. So I'm going to explain a couple of different engines that I've added into the deck and a couple of different spicy touches. One of those engines, massive credit goes out to Rob, who kind of suggested it to me, and I was like, okay, well how does that work? And then he mentioned the trap card and I was like, yo, this is mad. So I thought I'd do a profile for you, show you the concepts behind it and explain it as we go. Also shout out to Justin Thompson, who also gave me another suggestion in the deck, and I'll explain that when I get to it. So with all of that out of the way, please smash that like button, hit that notification bell and subscribe. Getting a video above 50 likes in the first 24 hours shows me that you want to see more Traptrix content, and I will bring that for you. Also, shout out to the rubber mat. I got this at the Pit Gaming store. It was part of the structure deck event, so kind of was, you know, kind of matches the deck, so it was a must kind of get for that kind of concept. Anyway, diving headfirst into the profile, we start off with Triple Mantis. Now this to me is the most important Traptrix monster. The more and more I play this, it just does so much for the deck on its own. So when I was looking at the other main cards in the forms of like Mamelo, and then obviously the Mamelo, Arachnacampa, and the Pudica, like the Mantis is the one that does everything. Yes, you kind of want the Pudica, but Pudica needs another Traptrix to be useful. Whereas Mantis can be normal summon, straight away gives you Arachnacampa, and then off the back of that, your Arachnacampa is going to be able to trigger the Sarah that you summon. So it just gives you the most advantage from the least amount of cards invested. Speaking of which, I'm still at 2 Arachnacampa. I'm highly considering putting this back up to 3. It's a bit of a brick if you see multiples of it in your hand. Yes, you can still drop it during your opponent's turn, and it does give you a way to trigger the Sarah. But it's kind of one of them ones where... and the biggest weakness of a Traptrix deck is when its normal summon gets destroyed. Whether its effect resolves or not, obviously a little bit less so with Mantis, because if it resolves you get Arachnacampa, you can still kind of play. But even then, like, if you don't have a Traptrix on the board, you can't special summon this down. So if the normal summon Mantis... an Imperm, okay, you can still play around with it. An Availer, still play around. But if it gets destroyed, whether it be a Ghost Ogre, and for example, I was watching a couple of duels with Sword Soul, so like Berserker, banishes it off the board. Anything like that, where it negates and destroys it, can be very tricky. And like I said, if you don't have another Traptrix monster, you can't Arachnacampa. It just becomes harder and harder to deal with it. So that's kind of where I'd consider having 3 of this, because then it's like, well, if I open up a Traptrix monster and my opponent gammas it, for example, because I can try Traptrix, I can still chain the Arachnacampa in the hand, special summon it down, still get my Sarah, and then I've still got 3 more cards to play around with that are going to be able to be trap cards or maybe additional extenders as well. I've then made a very bold choice in cutting Mamelo down to 2. Now the reason I've cut Mamelo down to 2 is because throughout general play, the normal summon of Mamelo isn't that great on her own. Yes, it's a normal summon that gets you a trap card which will get you to Sarah, but I feel the deck's evolved. Like, I want to see Mantis more than any of the other Traptrix, and that's going to get me the furthest in plays. So when I was trying to add in the additional engines, and this will make more sense once I show you the additional engines, one of the sacrifices was a second, like a cut in the 3rd Mamelo, and when you see the trap hole selection I've got as well, again, they are interchangeable depending on your local environment, and Mamelo became less reliant on being able to do that effect. Yes, it's great to special summon it from the deck because it is the only one that really has a out-and-out mandatory trigger that will allow you to trigger Sarah. But again, with Arachnacampa, we're kind of getting that covered. I've then got the 2 Pudica with the 1 Dioneer, and I'm now playing the 1 Atrax. Now, the 1 Atrax will actually make a bit more sense when I show you this additional engine, which is the very small Vernusylph Engine. Now, if you wanted to, you can increase the Vernusylph Engine, make it more prominent in the deck, but I kind of minimized it where it's all possible just to kind of test it out and see, get the feel for the deck, to see whether or not like the Flower Buds, which is the card that Rob suggested, works out at its max potential. So for those of you who don't know, Atrax again is unaffected by the effects of whole normal trap cards. You can activate whole normal trap cards from your hand. The activation and effects of normal trap cards activated on your side of the field cannot be negated. So that's really important because there are ways that your opponent cannot like stop a Gravediggers that's actually set and activated or a Floodgate that's set and activated. And where the Vernusylphs come into play, so the Vernusylphs have the ability to discard themselves and 1 monster or another Vernusylph card, and then you get to add a Vernusylph card from your deck to the hand. There go. The Flourishing lets you search out the buds, and I'll explain the buds in a second. If discarding to search out the trap card wasn't enough, it also lets you special summon back any earth monster from the graveyard. So yes, the Traptrix monster's special summon effects aren't the greatest if you're going first. Like Mantis isn't that great, neither is the Memello. Dineer is probably the best one, but you want to be doing that during your opponent's turn. During your turn to reset your your trap hole cards that you've sent. The Pudica is really good going second, but again doesn't really do anything going first. So the idea is that the Flourish would become an additional extender, which goes back to my example that I was mentioning earlier, that if my normal summoned monster or my Traptrix monster gets destroyed, I needed another way of getting an extender to the board in order to do so. Now the reason the Flower Bud is actually a really kind of cool card, and bear with me because it's got a lot of weird worded text. So you target face-up cards your opponent controls, up to the number of Earth monsters you control, with different names that were specialed from the graveyard. Now the reason that's actually quite a lot more prominent in this particular build is because with the brand new card of the Holotia, a lot of you may have looked over it, but the secondary effect to can banish it and then bring back a Traptrix monster from the graveyard is absolutely insane. So it gives you additional bounce. If that wasn't enough, of course, if you leave the monster that the Vernusylph summons back on the board, that can then trigger it. And you also have ways where we're going to be focusing a little bit more on the Colaria, because focusing on this will also special summon back Traptrix monsters from the graveyard during the end phase. So the idea is that when you end your turn, if you've gone through the Colaria play, you would end up having at least one, if not the ability to get two more on the board. So that's where it definitely comes into play, because I mean, end phase, you're not going to do anything with the monster you bring back with the Colaria, and then of course you'd have the ability to activate the Holotia. So you're going to get two monsters on the board, which means you've got two target bounces, and that's really kind of cool. It does return the Earth monsters you control to the hand equal to the number of the targets, and if you do, return at least one to the hand. And then as long as you return at least one of them, you get to return the targeted cards to the hand as well. So the idea is, again, you can, for example, if we use the two monster example, you target two cards your opponent controls. They need to be face up, annoyingly. And then you get the ability to return Earth monsters you control to the hand equal to the number of targets. So you have to then return the two to the hand. If you do, or if you have returned at least one, which you would have returned two, you can return the targeted cards to the hand. So it's basically like a double compulse for both sides. And the reason that works out nicely is if you, for example, bring back the Mantis during the end phase with the Colaria because you wanted to go for the Atrax route, not only can you use Mantis to bounce back one of your Floodgate cards or your Trap Hole cards that will trigger Sarah, but you then also have the ability of Atrax to be able to use that trap card, and by activating the Flower Bud, you return the Mantis to the hand, meaning the next turn you've got the one card combo and you've bounced one, if not two, of your opponent's monsters, or cards in general. So it's a really kind of cool card. It was something that I was trying to tech out and play around with. And the other reason I've put it in this particular build is I am playing another engine. I know too many engines. And I really wanted to try out the Labyrinth Engine. So I went again, tried to minimize this where at all possible. You could play 3 Lady Labyrinth if you wanted to, but I went with 2 Arianas and the 1 Lady Labyrinth. And the reason I've done that is because the normal summon of the Ariana will lead you to the Lady Labyrinth. And then off the back of that, my extenders, ideally the Vernusylph will be your best extender for something like this, then ultimately gives you rank 4 access. So straight away, that can then special summon back a Traptrix monster. That can then turn into Sarah. You can then use Arachnocampa. Arachnocampa will trigger Sarah. And then you can overlay the Arachnocampa plus the Ariana and go into Rafflesia. And then you've got a Rafflesia plus a trap card that will be set off of Sarah. And then you've got the ability to special summon down the Lady Labyrinth this turn or the turn after. Keeping in mind that when you activate normal trap cards, Lady Labyrinth will then be able to get direct access to it. Now, I feel playing the 2 engines in the same build is a little bit too much, so it's definitely something that I would look at, but I just kind of wanted to show you guys that you have a couple of different options. If you want to, you've got option A, which is just go pure Traptrix. In the space of these 3 cards, you'd be putting in stuff like your Neptis, your Viscello, and then, of course, your third Memello. So that takes out one of the engines. And then the other one, it depends if you wanted to double up the Vernusylphs, if you wanted to reduce, double up the Labyrinths. You've got the best of both. We are still playing the triple Parallel Xyz and the triple Ash Blossoms. I think that's all pretty straightforward and staple for a deck like this. A lot of people don't like the Parallels, and I do kind of understand it because it can be a brick if you see the 3rd copy or if you open up 2 copies of the Parallel. But I think it's just so powerful with a deck like this that has such a go-to Link 1 monster that you always want to get to, that playing something like Parallel is just too good not to. Obviously, we're only playing one spell, so I ended up cutting Prosperity, I cutted Frost and everything like that to again make space for the Labyrinth and the Vernusylph Engine. But that is again down to personal preference. If you go, you know what, I actually want the Prosperities in, or I want a draw card in, or anything like that, then you can swap them out for one of the engines that I've shown you, and you can kind of build it back from there. For the trap cards, triple Imperm, triple Evenly, triple Shade Brigadine, triple Holtier. This card's nuts, such a good card. You should all know what these do by now. Double Floodgates still, I mean, again, you adapt the Floodgates, or like I said, with the trap holes, you adapt them depending on your local environment. And then the last card, whether you want to put it in, like this is a 41 card deck at the moment. The last card that was suggested by Justin Thompson is whether you want to put it in or not is Chain Hole. Because it is a whole normal trap card. So in theory it is settable off of Sarah. Because Sarah does read that you get to, if another Traptrix monster, you get to set one whole normal trap directly from the deck. Which is exactly what this is. And the reason this is kind of cool is it's a when effect, which can be a bit of a bummer. But when your opponent activates a monster effect in response to a card or effect activated, negate that opponent's effect, then your opponent can banish one card from their hand or deck with the same original name as the negated card. If they did not, you can banish one random card from their hand. Now the reason this is so good is, in theory, if you were to activate Chain Hole, so I'm going to go for Dragoon as an example here, right? But let's say you already had the Chain Hole set, they've made Dragoon, okay? And you go Floodgate, and they chain Dragoon's effect to negate the Floodgate. You could then, in theory, chain the Chain Hole to negate the destruction of the Floodgate, meaning the Floodgate will then go through. It would negate Dragoon, and then your opponent can banish a Dragoon from their extra deck. I believe so, anyway. But they won't be able to. And because they didn't, you then banish one from the hand. So not only have they discarded a card off a Dragoon, it's still going to get Floodgated, and then you're going to banish another one from their hand. So in order to make Dragoon, they've at least played Branded Fusion. So they've already played through like 3 cards already. But it is very, very particular. So I wouldn't be putting this in as a staple card. It's just something to look into that could be really, really cool. The biggest issue with this is it's a when effect, and your monster, it has to be an opponent's monster effect in response to a card effect. It's not like if your opponent activates a monster effect, you go, yeah, cool. It's one of the ones where you have to kind of bait them into it to try and negate one of your cards to then trigger it. So I've not really put this in this deck right now, but it is just an option that you, if you didn't know of its existence, it's definitely a card you might be like, all right, I'll pick this up at one of. You never know, it could be a kind of cool little tech that no one's expecting. So that's it for the main deck. The extra deck is relatively quite straightforward to everything else that I've usually done for the Traptrix. So triple Sarah, you know, standard on that one. Still the one Caloria, 2 Octopus. This is obviously your main boss monster. The one Pinicula, the one Alamiris, and the one Rafflesia. And then the only change that I've really made to the deck is I've added in the Bengal Answer. And the reason I've done this is it's just a nice Link 4 that if you lock yourself into plants and insects, you can still make. And it can be made quite easily with the Atopus plus any of your other Traptrix monsters. And on top of that, you can banish a Graveyard Sarah and an Atopus to bring it back to the board. So if you wanted to, you could use this to link into another Atopus. And then you could then banish the first Atopus and one Sarah to get it back. So it's just an option instead of access code. I feel it would be a little bit more useful than access code in this particular build. One Link Spider, and then Zeus, Baguska, Redoer, Steel Swan Roach. Again, these are all entirely up to you on what you want to do. I feel Redoer is like pretty much a staple in here. But you can see that with the, like, there's only 5 cards that are not insect and plants. So if I did like lock myself a Arachnocampa, which is rare because I'm only playing 2 of it, I still had like so many really good options to utilise and kind of play. So, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is pretty much it for the deck. So I know these are kind of a little bit unorthodox options, but that's kind of what I wanted to do, is I wanted to show you different options that you could play, that you're not restricted with this deck. And quite like Dark Worlds, what makes a deck like this so good is it has so many different variants that all work really well depending on different environments and different matchups and everything else. So yeah, I thought you'd enjoy this. If you do have any questions, by all means, please put them in the comments down below. I will, as absolutely always, be more than happy to answer them for you. Should you have any other questions that you want to send to me privately, by all means, we've got our Facebook, we've got our Twitter, everything like that. And again, I would be more than happy to help you guys out and kind of go through anything you guys need. Anyway, for now, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share. Till next time, as absolutely always, stay safe and, of course, happy dueling.